two, one. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Inside Movies Galore. I am your host, David Strege, and here we are in the room. We have the gaming club leader, Dan, or one of the gaming club leaders, Dan.
That's me.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Doing real good.
Hey, Mo, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic, sir. Thank you
Jake.
for having me.
I'm doing quite good.
And Brandon, how are you doing tonight?
Hello, doing well.
So, a couple of months ago already, probably a month and a half ago, Dan told us about a trilogy that is locally from his state of Vermont, and we decided to invite him on to discuss each film as they were. And the films are directed by John O'Brien, and the first film, in order today and for this particular discussion, is called Vermont Is for Lovers, and it was filmed in 1992. And the film is about a couple of two lovers who are out of state, and they come to Vermont, and they are trying to plan for a wedding. So, that being said, since there really was no IMDb information, what was your first impression of this first movie, Dan? Since you introduced this to us.
Well, it's funny because this was the last movie out of that trilogy that I actually watched. For years, I couldn't find a copy of it. So probably 20 years later, I'm able to finally watch it. And I just barely, in the last year, watched that film. My first reaction to it was, it's probably my least favorite of the trilogy. Just because the story, there's not a whole lot of story going on. I think the movie was really an excuse to document the town of Tunbridge and the people that live there, because it's all obviously non-scripted. It's pretty much improvised acting by the townie folk. So I think it's more of a documentary than it is a movie.
Okay. Going over to Jake. What was your first impression of this first film here?
Well, this definitely is one that's fairly new on my radar. I have to admit, until Dan brought it up in discussion, I'd never heard of the trilogy. I can't remember if I've heard some of the events surrounding the second film, but I know that the main trilogy itself I had not really heard of. But I, of course, acquired a copy because I was like, well, this seems like one that must be in the collection. And I wanted to be well prepared. Unfortunately, did not budget enough time for the commentaries, and I wish I had. But at any rate, the movies themselves, this one, I agree. It was probably my least favorite of the bunch. It was intriguing. It was very intriguing. It did have a strong documentary vibe, definitely. You have that very, 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 very thin plot that almost is an excuse for these two people to go out and interview people in a sense. And I'll get into more detail on that in the discussion, I'm sure. But my overall impression was that it was generally a good movie. It was clearly an early effort, someone kind of sussing things out as a director, I think. I really enjoyed the music. It had sort of a Charlie Brown vibe to me. And overall, and of course, a lot of the scenery and stuff was just really gorgeous. So yeah, it was quite interesting.
Okay. Going over to you, Mo. I guess going over to Brandon.
You scared him away.
Brandon, what was your first impression of this film?
Of course, I first heard about this film when I was told about Man with a Plan, which Dan let us know about, and of course I looked at the whole trilogy there, and of course we all got into it that night. It's like, oh, we've got to discuss this. There's just something about the flavor of something just so centered on something local like that.
Mm-hmm.
That just told me I have to see this. So I ended up grabbing it, and at the first opportunity I could get, I found a decent auction for, and it's a beautiful DVD box set that they put on.
It's a nice
And
set.
unlike Jake, I did manage to get time to watch all the special features and all the commentaries, which are very unique.
Yep.
Especially in this particular one, because Vermont Is for Lovers, basically he interviews one of the older gentlemen about the history of the area throughout the entirety of it, not really all that much about the film itself.
Huh.
So
He sure is
looking
the
at it
star of it, though.
as a whole.
Fred.
Oh no, not Fred. It was a different one. Gosh, I can't think.
Oh,
of
you're
his
not
name.
talking about the rocks?
This was the commentary on the first one, on Vermont Is for Lovers, and it was very interesting because you got to hear a lot of background about, okay, this house was built around this time, belonging to this person.
Oh, right on. Okay, I thought you were talking about in the movie. My bad, dude.
And a lot of the trilogy does. I mean, the town is the character. I mean, Turnbridge is the character. It is the main character. It's just the stories that play out within Turnbridge, and that's the fabric that connects it. And I do feel like this is the weakest of the three for me, but it was still fun and introduced me well. I'm glad I watched it first. I wouldn't have wanted to watch it last, but I am kind of glad I did get to see it first. It still gave me a good feel for what I was going to look forward to for the rest of that series. So it was kind of fun. So I did enjoy it. It was a very relaxed feeling film.
I myself did, after hearing about it from you, Dan, I went out, and as soon as I could, I found a copy of the trilogy, and it was not cheap, but at least I got a copy. So, I as well am glad that I watched this movie first. I do myself believe, yes, it is the weakest out of the bunch, because of the fact that it was kind of a starter the film for the filmmaker. I think he was feeling out where he wanted to go with the town of Tunbridge, and how much of the history and the surrounding facilities of the whole environment that circumference the feeling that he got while he was there. So I feel like he barely tipped the iceberg when he was filming this film. And, at first, the husband to be kind of annoyed me.
Yeah.
He was not really connecting with his bride to be, and I started to wonder, well, why the fuck were they getting together to begin with? Why did they? It seemed like they were jumping into this marriage at first, so it was like, okay, where is it going to go? But I thought it was a relatively cute film for its time, and it brought a sort of romanticness to the table a little bit. So Mo, what were some of your first impressions of this film when you first watched it?
Oh well, this was my first time seeing it for sure. I saw Man with the Plan because Dan was compulsively, I'm pretty sure still does, compulsively buy that movie. So he has surplus of copies, or did for a while. And he sent me one in a box, and I watched it, and it's kind of one of those things you immediately fall in love with, because it's just so wholesome and relaxing, and they're like the perfect home with the flu movies, So that's pretty much what I was expecting going into this, and I think it delivered. The sort of small town style he has is deceptively hidden in there in this little like, oh, should we or shouldn't we get married story that's really sort of irrelevant about halfway through. You just want to see more interviews with the town folk, and like the sheep shearer guy was one of my favorite parts. It's just he shows right out of the gate that he had a knack for capturing the essence of this like small town, and then in Man with a Plan, obviously he has gotten rid of like some of that awkwardness probably, and they figured it out a little bit more on how to interject that into a story that actually stays pretty relevant the whole time, So I guess that's the thing that was, probably that left the most impression on me is like you could watch this movie without the parts with the married couple or where they're talking about their marriage anyways. It would still be an enjoyable thing to sit through.
And actually, that's one point I guess I'll go ahead and mention for this one, and to a degree, Nosy Parker. I almost felt that a lot of the more fiction elements, the more kind of scripted, but clearly they were injected as part of the script. Like in this case, the marriage process. They felt a little awkward at times.
Yeah.
I felt like a lot of the film was real calming and organic and just flowed. But then when they started bickering, it almost felt almost shoehorned in at times.
Yeah, it really just feels out of place because the rest of it, and it's if it was all just people that were cast and scripted, I don't think it would maybe be as apparent. But just the wholesome fucking charisma of those people, man, it just so overshadows the written part of the story that it's like, who cares? I want to listen to this old lady talk about leaning on her hoe, I don't.
Actually, I'm going to draw a connection with another series I'm watching right now. Apparently, there's actually a term in manga and anime called iyashike that translates healing type. And it basically refers to really mellow slice of life kind of stuff that's like almost boring, but in a really good way. Like it's relaxing in a good way. And I'm watching a show called Natsume's Book of Friends that very much fits in that genre. But I would definitely put this trilogy in that genre too, because they're really relaxing. Yeah. They are slice of life in a way. Even the one that's a political drama has more of the feel of a slice of life than. So it's
I don't think it really rains, but it gives you. It's like the visual. Right. It's like the movie equivalent to that mellow feeling of like just sitting inside during the rain or something. You know what I mean?
And I think they had a great missed opportunity in the third one, which again, when we do that discussion, they apparently filmed a cameo from one of the members of Fish and cut it. It would have been a great addition.
Well, that's interesting, though, the connection to the anime there. I wonder if old Fred ever met any of the Japanese in the war before he got liberated by terrorists.
Let's look at the plot of this movie. So, the plot is that this couple comes from, I assume that they said that they were from New York. And so they're city folks. So they come down to this country, apparently. The young woman, Myra, or Marya, who was played by Marya Khan. She has an aunt who has a sheep farm that lives in Tunbridge, I guess, and what they're doing is they're preparing for this marriage, and on the offset, on the offset of this particular story arc, the husband gets bored and he starts and he ends up going into town to check his messages because he's so in tune to electronics and keeping up with his city life. So he goes into town to the only phone booth that there is, and he calls, and then he gets lost along the way. And while getting lost, he starts to ask people about, marriage and how long they've been together and shit like that. And I guess in a way he starts learning about, the idiosyncrasies of life, so to speak.
Well, they kind of come in gung-ho for their marriage, and then they start to doubt it a bit. And I liked that element of it, where it's like these fast-living big city folks all ready to rush off into marriage have to come where like life, moves at a crawl to really think about whether they should be doing this. I love how that pastor guy like totally just seeds the doubt there too at the beginning.
Justice.
You known each other a while?
I actually think that's a. I was gonna say that's a connection if you think about it to the third film. You get a couple going to the country to kind of get away from everything and go into it in the first film. I mean, shoot, the husband's all about the architecture, trying to look at all the covered bridges, and then of course, in the third film, it's about a couple who's been married and is kind of moving over there in order to wind things down for them. So it's kind of a couple winding up and a couple winding down. It's kind of cool in that matter. Now, the covered bridges
in a sense,
too.
They brought it full.
Yeah.
I do want to mention you mentioned that not the justice the magistrate or whatever. I gotta say Euclid Farnham is an awesome name. But
those Kermit,
and you also have to rewind a little bit. The film starts with their proposal sequence, where you get this really strange montage, and it is a strange montage.
It is.
It's kind of fun. It's cute in a weird way. But
it really is. Dan, what are your thoughts about this couple going into this marriage here?
I mean, it's such an afterthought that you don't pay attention to it. You're just waiting for that next interview with the town folk, or you're listening to the music in between segments and bits. But yeah, when their acting is, let's be honest, it's pretty shit.
Yeah. So the girl's somewhat better than the dude, but
the girl, she went on to do more with movies, but she reminded me a little bit of some of the acting in some of the early Kevin Smith films. Honestly, some of those characters, and it
was, and it's super campy. So it fits it because it keeps it light, even though it does kind of stink. But it's so bad it is good. There's no point in I thought about it today when I rewatched it, and I'm like, God, there's just nothing going on.
and the guy is just, when he takes, I believe that was Anne O'Brien, who is the aunt, who, Dan, you might know more about this than I do. She is the filmmaker's actual aunt, or
I want to say there is some connections there. Like I feel like a lot of these movies are based on John O'Brien's like personal experience,
right?
Because he lived in New York City. He went to NYU, so I think there's some connections there on all that stuff.
Okay.
That really helped that the real life version of that lady actually had the mentally handicapped clairvoyant dog. That's like one of my favorite parts. I ran over it. It's just made of rubber.
The dude, George, I think is George Thrush. I think plays him. He did annoy me. He grew on me as the film went on. Partly because the person I was watching with made the point that he was a really good conversationalist. He was really good at engaging people and drawing out information. it still had a stagey documentary feel. It didn't flow quite like a conversation should most of the time, but there were times where it really did flow. But he was still really good at getting good answers. But when it came to, anytime he had to act, he ended up coming off as a self-centered jerk. And that whole thing about the phones, like what, you really don't have any modern touch tone phones here. He just came off as this totally entitled jerk. Like, he did not come off
my
well.
internet was going full rotary dial for a minute there.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think too, it's because that is Fred in the movie, right? Towards the end.
Yeah.
Talk about the rocks and
all
shit.
three.
Yeah, like I found it pretty magical how he was like it basically, because he kind of got the guy to break character. I don't think you could stay in any type of character as shitty as your acting ability is if you're hanging out with Fred. That guy just seems too personable. Like he reminds me of old farmers that I've had to fuck with. And it's, dude, if I made that movie, I'd still be out there talking about the rocks with Fred. Like, the movie never would have got done. It would have just been about him the first time, you know? Because he's just, there is something magical about that little, you know.
I did kind of enjoy the talk that Maria had with that older lady towards the end, where she had come across her while she was going on that like 4-mile hike just to get back to the sheep farm.
That farm was great.
I
love the directions in the movies where it's like it's country folk directions where it's like it's about a mile that way, and really that means a fucking long ways, you know.
Yeah,
like 93, and she still tended her garden.
Yeah, but yeah, I like that scene where the guy was giving directions. It was like,
it's great, man. I mean, it's all
now,
descriptions, landmarks. None of it is like streets.
That was Fred Tuttle.
Well, shit, around here, half of the streets have changed too. So you probably fairly consistently find directions like that given here, you know.
Well, you just go over to the left here, and then turn to make a left here, and then you go over the cover bridge here, and.
And yeah, I will admit that his old man was great in that scene. He was absolutely great. And that was one of the disappointments in Man with a Plan, was that he played such a small role. That was but
getting on though.
Well, yeah, I mean a lot of these people were, and you have to take that into account.
That was an interesting scene in here when he was talking to him about what whether he went on dates at any given point in time. And he kind of reminded me of My Fair Lady, Eliza Doolittle's like father in a sense in his talk, you know. So just how he was speaking just a little bit, but
which one did Fred?
No, Fred's father.
His father? His father?
Yeah, his father. Yeah.
Now, Fred reminded me a lot more of like if Eugene Levy was about twice as old and he talked like Boomhauer from King of the Hill.
Oh, I love it, man. A Man with a Plan. Oh, well, we'll get to that. There's just so much.
Yes,
to love about that. But man, Fred, he's a spry old dude. I'll just say that. He did one of the most insane stunts I've seen someone perform themselves in a long time in that second movie. I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about if you take that swing set. Oh, man.
Yeah. I'm not sure there was so much stunt work in this one. No.
Nothing could touch that stunt Fred pulled in that second one. Man. The guy's a legend. He's right there with Schusterman Levine for me anymore, being like just best movie characters.
Who would have won him?
And the fact that he's basically real makes it amazing. Yeah. You know,
but Mo,
first time I saw Man with a Plan, you could tell. Go ahead.
Mo, which one do you think would win in the ring?
I don't know, man. Fred had that time in the war, like I said. He was there till he got liberated by Paris. So I don't know if Chusky could accept that. He spent his life in the barn, man.
True.
All right. Did everyone? Okay. So favorite, since there weren't really any special effects per se, because everything was kind of natural. Did anyone have any favorites?
They did play a little with the camera work with those dream sequences and whatnot, but that wasn't anything too crazy. But
that's right, because didn't she kind of have a baby dream?
that was that was the final movie.
Okay.
This was the one where the Maria had the dream about cracking up at the wedding, like she couldn't hold it.
Yeah.
My internet was
liked,
the beginning of my internet goes wonky, and I disconnect like at least once. How did you find out about these movies, Dan? I don't know if I heard that.
Good plan.
That was probably my junior or senior year of high school. We had the local video store. Man with a Plan had been released, and that got a really big push in our area. So, I mean, I'm 30 minutes from Tunbridge, so I rented it based on the cover because I thought it looked really fun, and that's pretty much how I found out about it. I didn't realize it was a trilogy until years later. There was a local DVD shop in town, and I went in there and started talking about this movie, and he's like, "Did you know about these?" And I was like, "No." So pretty interesting. Yeah, I just found it on a whim and fell in love with it.
And then you just started buying the shit out of it when you would see it.
And it's very cool to have something that's local for you as a film too.
Right.
I mean, there are some films that are from Wisconsin that are local that I know that some people refer to, but this is kind of a serious thing for Vermont. I mean, this is like the calling card.
Yeah, well, it's a deep cut regionally because it's not just made in some city over there or something. Just happens to be in the state. This is made about like the people that make the state.
Right.
I can get hyped for like
it's like
movies, I guess, but nobody's making movies over here, man.
The vast majority of the stuff made in Virginia it just happens to take place. A scene takes place in Arlington, or a scene takes place in some random part of the state. It's very rare that they really come here with a full-blown production, but it's even rarer that they do something that really needed to be done here. I think Terrence Malick's The New World is the only one I can think of that really needed to be done where it was done. And
half the
that
time
was a big budget film, So I mean, for us, it's more the music scene. Like, we've definitely got some music that's kind of on this level. I would put Carbon Leaf on this level. Like, they're kind of known nationally, but they're not. But yeah, it's really cool. I wish we had more like that.
Everything from Vermont, there's a lot of culture, but the thing is, as far as stuff in Vermont getting out there, you think of Vermont, what do you think of? You think of Ben and Jerry's, and that's about it.
Or the Vermont Teddy Factory.
Bernie Sanders.
Well,
honestly,
I think it's very cool that Ben and Jerry's has a cemetery, for ice cream. So that's pretty cool.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I could be wrong. Magic Hat is from Vermont, right?
Yeah.
That's good stuff. I think it's fallen out of favor here. It used to be more popular here.
Well,
England kind of suffers from that.
Maybe people know about Vermont, really.
Right. And I think it seems like stuff from New England gets landlocked, but in a different way. Like, it's like landlocked by the rest of the country. Well,
I mean, you got to get
all types of rad.
Is the factory for LL Beans in Vermont? I seem to. No. Okay. I went on a trip years ago, and I seem to remember going from Ben and Jerry's to
4 Mill Beans place.
I went from Ben and visiting their factory to the Vermont Teddy Bear Factory, and then like within the next night we were at the LL Beans like store, the main store that is. So I I was unsure.
Crazy corporate trip right there.
One thing to look at when you're looking at Vermont is the history that's involved. And as a Virginian, of course, history is a big thing in our state as well. And listening to the commentary track when you start like, yeah, I remember him when he sold that house in 1917. And he's like, you're talking about how he first got electricity when he was 50. I mean, things like that. Like in Virginia, I mean, we have at least one covered bridge that I know of, and I know pretty well. And shoot, Jake, you've seen that covered bridge that I'm telling you.
Probably.
And then we have other things like I know in what was it, Waynesboro or close to that area, where they have houses from the 1800s in there in the Civil War era that look very similar to those type of farmhouses where they're built like kind of just to the side of the road. Those are things that are just really cool little aspects, and that's as we've said, it's the stories, but also kind of the visuals. It's not so much, like I said, not so much in this movie. The third one's the most excellent with visuals as far as I'm concerned. But as far as it goes, I think that just a historic thing, and listening to the commentary really does improve the feel of the film, because then you can go back and say, okay, I can see where that was, and it's just a couple more great stories that you're getting to hear about everything around it. Of course, the guy who directed, I guess, the main actor, he was talking about that was his first car. It was the car that they were using. That was actually his first car.
And I have to admit, though, talking about the scenery and whatnot, if I ever do, well, when I do, because I'm saying when I ever make it up to visit Vermont, I'd probably be one of those people that they keep calling leaf peepers and that kind of stuff. I'd probably be one of those people. I'd be up there for the nation. But
the guy was like, we should have a sign that says "Welcome to Vermont." Now get out. Shit was awesome.
Well, yeah. I mean, and I'll admit, I've been in roughly that neck of the woods, but not quite there. I went to Connecticut once, so that's the only time I've been in New England. So that's something I want to remedy. Definitely want to remedy. But and I made it to Canada once, and I want to get back up to there one of these days. But one day. But I did get a little bit of outsider feel, because in Canada, everywhere I went, I was met with this, "Oh, you're from America. Oh, well, are you just visiting?" "Yeah." "Oh, welcome. How are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay." I'm sure it's even worse now. But
thankfully you didn't have to tell them you moved there.
No, I know. Well, actually, I was up there to apply for an ESL position in Japan. So I told them, I was like, "I'm up here for a job interview," and they're like, "Really?" "Yeah, I'm going to teach English in Japan." "Oh, welcome."
So let's talk about,
yeah, dude.
Let's talk about favorite scenes from this, because there's really, it really is a straightforward film. I mean, you got the marriage, you got the little romantic gesture that the husband to be does by talking to the animal people, having a parade,
animals.
Well, and
I love that look he's giving her too. Like, yeah, that's something, right? Isn't it? Isn't that pretty rad?
Stand up in overalls and a bow tie, yeah. But in any case, so
she could have looked at him and said it was a load of bull.
Jake, what was your favorite scene, if you could take from this film?
For me, favorite scene?
Yeah.
Probably the one with the old dude and his father. I mean, they were both pretty fun characters. I mean, there's there were a few interactions here and there, and then, there was that one simple thing at the wedding reception where I've heard this before,
Oh, the old
but
man.
it just, when they said, have you lived here all your life? And he's like, well, not yet. It was just like something about that moment and the way he said it. I was just like, okay, I've heard that before, but I love that you said that. That was perfect.
Warms your heart every time.
There were a couple of good moments, definitely.
Alrighty, Dan. If there was a moment that you could take from this particular first film, what scene would you take from it?
I mean, there's a bunch of them, but the one that sticks out is where they was it the guy that asked Fred if he wants to go to the wedding, and Fred's like, I don't know, let me ask my wife. Big dog, wedding.
Right.
I don't know if that was scripted or if that was improvised or what, but that was hilarious. You just hear on the porch, nope.
Right.
So that was
Alrighty.
a moment that really sticks out to me.
I noticed she wasn't mentioned in the next one.
No, she wasn't. That is the weird thing too. That's another thing.
No, I think it said that he became a widower at 31, or so, like they retconned her ass.
So,
I
Mo,
believe it says
Well,
Fred became a widower at 31, which was, yeah, that's a bummer, dude.
Mo,
And then I think his dad broke his hip, so then they were both fucking stuck without being able to work, and they just trying to make a garden, your own fruit that doesn't pay the bills or whatever.
Mo, if you could take a scene from this movie and pick it as a favorite, what would it be?
Well, I mean, again, like Dan said, there's a lot. I mean, almost all the stuff with the town folk is great. The old lady talking about leaving on her hoe. The sheep shearing guy is like, for some reason, that stands out as a good moment in the movie to me. But obviously, just the stuff with Fred.
The way the sheep shearer looked like he hadn't been sheared in months.
Oh, that was going on my mind the whole time. Like, the guy that shears sheep looks like he desperately needs a haircut. How does that work?
I thought that was.
It didn't even look like fashionably long hair. It looked like uncomfortable, but he's long since stopped giving a fuck hair, But I guess when you dedicate your life to, giving sick fades to the other, God's creatures, you don't take the time for yourself or something.
Well,
he sheared a lot of sheep with those New Zealanders. That blows my mind. 500 in a day. That's insane.
Oh,
yeah.
But yeah, just that scene where he's talking with Fred about the rocks, man. I love how you can hear it in the dude's voice. Like, he kind of just stopped. I'm sure he probably almost momentarily forgot they were making a movie. Like, Fred just seems like that type of dude. If he was explaining something to you in his weird Vermont, like, Hobbit speak or whatever you call that, like, I'm just listening to every word of that, and I want to follow him around and ask him more questions about his farm. That would have been the movie for me. If I made it, would have been just chilling with Fred, going through family albums and like asking him about the history of his farm. I think I would have probably even said to hell with the town. I just want to know about this guy and his dad. So yeah, that'd be my favorite moment. And that final bit at the end where they're talking about how they miss the city and listing off all the fucked up things about the city that make them like not think too hard on their mistakes,
Alrighty, Brandon. If there was anything that any scene that you could take from this film, what would you take from it?
I really like the scene where he's asking that older guy on the farm for directions. That I don't know what it is. It's really the first introduction to the storytelling aspect, where he's learning about that concept of like longevity of marriage and just the whole farming aspect. It's a cool introduction to how the movie works, and that's still sticks out in my head as the most prevalent scene for me.
Okay. If I could take a scene from this, I would have to say the moment where he's talking to the couple of farmers, and the one guy he's got a couple of jokes up his sleeve. I think he ultimately plays in Nosy Parker later on, as George.
Mhm.
But I liked the fact that at first he was kind of stiff-lipped, and then he became kind of a talker during because at first I thought the husband was kind of being annoying by asking questions, but when he actually started to have a conversation with these people, and especially with the father of Mr. Tuttle, I feel like he that particular conversation. It's like because he was older and elderly, he actually enjoyed starting to tell some of the stories that he knew from his perspective. And I think that's what I gained from this, especially since my sister, she works a lot with the elderly, and oftentimes they have stories to tell. You know, I mean, they want to be remembered. So to me, hearing some of the stories from the older folks in the town of Tunbridge is kind of like the point of this film. That's the aspect that I enjoyed from this film. As far as music,
like you guys said, the town and the vibe is the star of the movie.
Oh yeah,
you know, and then the people, like the real people, are supporting actors, and then the actors are just there. And I think, you know, like especially knowing that there's other movies that they did, you know, that these people loved this, right? Like the people of this area probably had a blast working with this dude on these movies. You know, I'm sure it was like a highlight of their golden years or whatever.
Well, like what Dave was just saying, like, I mean, I have seen this a lot just in my particular jobs. I deal with a lot of older folks, both in the library and in the nursery. And some of them just really like to talk. And I'm just saying, like, not necessarily just telling stories, although that's part of it, but some of them just really love being able to talk. And the idea that they're rambling, well, not ramblings, but you know what I mean, like that not only someone's listening, but someone cares enough to actually be filming it for posterity. I think a lot of them probably really had a blast with that idea.
For sure. It's heartwarming.
Cool.
Oh, yeah.
As far as the music goes, I swear there were at least 3 or 4 renditions of "Farmer in the Dell." Let's see, Bingo, and
Here Comes the Bride.
Yeah.
And again, the way the instrumentation, it reminded me of the Vince Guaraldi trio. It really did remind me of a Charlie Brown special, and in a good way.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Was there anything else that anyone wanted to speak up about this film before we?
You know, I guess since it's the first one, I'd throw out there not to go into this, you know, expecting it to be like a normal movie. It is in some loose sense, but it's also very much not. Just, you know, watch it on a nice quiet day when you're really in the mood to just sink into the vibe of a movie, and then it'll have you prepped really well to go into the second one. If this region of the world can do any equivalent of dialing it up to 11 Spinal Tap style, that's what Man with a Plan does, you know. And you are in for a fucking treat if you enjoy this. So just go in with like no expectations and just let the movie fill you full of fucking comfort food, man, because that's what it is.
Yeah.
All right. I think on that note, we shall end this discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to know anything about us, I'm sure you can follow us into the next discussion, and we'll tell us a little bit more about who we are at the end of the third film discussion. So in any case, definitely take a look at this film, give it a one-time watch if you have not. Though it was the least film in some of our eyes, I think you should at least give every single film out there at least a viewing. So,
and the lesser film in a trilogy as solid as this is still a good compliment. It's available in 9 parts on YouTube if you can't find a copy of it right now. It looks to be
really?
pretty good quality.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
Thank you
first
for
one,
listening.
definitely.
Thank you for listening. Have a great day, evening, or morning, wherever you are. Thank you for listening, and like, share, and subscribe. And so now on to A Man with a Plan.
All right.
All right.